It is another Blue Room Weekly, and it is myself, Warren, who has swapped roles really with me mate Dave here, who have got on with me. Dave has kindly allowed me to do this week's weekly and for the foreseeable as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to be able to take over hosting duties. And I thought, what better way of taking over a hosting duty than having the guy next to me who's invited me onto so many shows before, who's played a massive part of me being on the Blue Room. So, Dave, just before we go into the questions, thank you once again, and also, just Everton aside a second, I think it's been a big week, really, hasn't it, with everything what's gone on. I say Everton aside, obviously it is a lot to do with Everton. I haven't really spoke to you since the whole Dyche and Moyes leaving, and we haven't really discussed it together like we usually do. How's it been from I suppose from a broadcasting point of view, really, because we do so much of it, don't we? And I suppose you've just been absolutely chock a block with it all. And I know that listening to Paddy and listening to Matt on the brilliant show they do on the Byline, they talk a lot about how through their respective jobs how it is. But just how's it been from a sort of to give listeners an idea out there? How's it been from your point of view, having to sort things out and get things organised with everything what's gone in the last week?
Well, it took me a while to book you in with Theo Walcott and Chappers and all the A-listers the other day. It took me a while to put that together, but no, it's been quite surreal, to be honest with you, having Moyes back. I mean, I know I've spoken a few times in our shows recently about sort of having a professional sort of relationship with him over the amount of years that I used to have to go and speak to him every week. He seems very much the same. I think a lot of people are right when they've said he feels like he's a little bit more mellow than he used to be. Seemed to be a lot of nostalgia as well when you've seen him talk in the week and you've seen the various pictures of him in and around and, shaking hands with people who've worked there and people at the club who he'll still know, like 12 years on from when he was. And having him back, dare to say it, because I always bang on about this, but I felt a bit of nostalgia. I felt like I'm glad to see him in a certain aspect of it. And then I think when obviously we saw the game that happened, it just shows you, and we've titled this how much of an uphill task that he faces. I think that was when any of us who've sort of tiptoed off the ground and how happy we are to have David Moyes back or whatever it is your opinion is on it. I think it was given to us quite quickly. The Stars' reality of what he's got to do is it's going to be difficult. That said, I think out of the list of managers we were potentially looking at to try and get in after Sean Dyche, I felt that he was the most appropriate to do so. I feel like he was the most sensible appointment to make. I feel when people have spoken about the length of contract, which I think with Dyche, this was an issue, and it's been an issue for several of the managers we've had in recent years, how much time you're going to give these guys, because at the end of the day, Everton are spending a lot of money on paying out compensation to these managers that they've ended up sacking. No, and Dyche is another one on that list that he's going to be getting a couple of £1 million for that. So I do wonder, sort of behind closed doors, how Moyes was able to organise a 2.5-year contract, because I thought it'd be 18 months would be more sensible. But he's obviously championed himself as somebody who can come back in, turn Everton around, and then look forward to Bramley more and, looking at a little bit more solidity amongst Everton. I feel as if when it was said that he was coming back, sort of from a media perspective, it was very much retro in a way that referring back to what happened when he first came in 2002. And I made a comment on the post-match after the Villa game that if you were to compare the side we have right now to when he came in 2002, there's a lot of similarity between those two. He's coming in at the stage of a season where Everton are in a relegation-threatened campaign. I don't think we were quite in this situation when he first came in, but it was similar in 2002. You look at the squads as well, and I'd love our listeners to get back to this, and everyone who watches on YouTube. If you were to compare those two squads from 2002 to now, make an 11 amongst them, I'd be really interested to see what people would say there. Because you think about the likes of Marcus Bent back in those days, the like of a Carsley in the Yobo as well. I think Mark Mosey mentioned on the post-match. You think of those players would probably walk into Everton now But then obviously Nigel Martin versus Jordan Pickford would be an interesting debate. So, but it does make me think that, and puts more faith in me that it's him that's come back as the manager, because he's been here and done it before. The question then becomes, how different is the game these days? Because you look at what he did after he left Everton. Football was a completely different world to when he first took over us.
Yeah, there's some elements that I agree with. I think that certainly I'm with you, and I've said this myself, that I think it's probably the right appointment, and I think there was a lot of, like you said, the nostalgia around the appointments, and I think there was a feel-good feeling, and I think very quickly we were back down to earth and back down to reality last night with the realities of where the squad is at and where Everton are at as a club at the moment. So I suppose my next question is for you, Dave, is, almost 24 hours later, I heard you on post-match, and I heard the lads on post-match, and it was great to listen to everyone, our mate Rob Vera being back over this side of the water and from the Atlantic as well. For me, I felt there was subtle improvements. Now, I don't think it was wholesale. I don't think it was anything I watched and I thought, oh my God, we're going to be safe, no problem. But for me, I did notice little subtle things. I thought that whilst we were still quite direct, I felt that there was more of it wasn't so one-dimensional as it's been in recent weeks. And I felt as well, I don't know about you, but I felt as listen, Moyes has only had the squad for 2 days since he's been back, and he would have been the manager he is, and being he doesn't leave things to chance, does he? He's very thorough in his preparation. So I think he would have known about the squad we've got, and I think he would have known certainly about what Villa would have offered us as a threat and as an opponent. But I felt that the match itself gave Moyes a lot of learning and a lot of information that maybe he wouldn't have gained in those two days, or maybe he wouldn't have gained from just watching us, on TV or whatever it might have been. So I suppose the question is, do you feel that, we've titled the show, does he face an uphill task? And of course he does, but is it that much bigger after last night's performance, or do you feel that you saw enough there to think, knowing the manager he is and knowing what he can get out of teams, do you think there's enough there that gives you confidence going forward that Moyes is the man and will be the man to pick up points along the way and get us playing in a way that isn't as one-dimensional?
Well, he's certainly not a manager to jump the gun, is he? He's not somebody you think who's come straight in there, had wholesale changes and thought, you know what, I've got to do a complete 180 in terms of what Sean Dyche has left me with. The predicament Everton in as well. He'll take into account in his own stride, Will Moyes, and that's what I've always sort of known him as. He's not one who tries to ruffle too many feathers, really, which is sort of ironic to say that when you look at other people that have called him like Dower Dave and all this sort of thing. You think of the reputation that he had, and Dillard and Dave and all these sort of things. I don't think he's like that, sort of more internally, and having to have that role in terms of going to speak to him and things like that. I don't think he's like that at all, to be honest with you. And I think he's very much his own man when it comes to stuff like this. I don't think he'll be looking at this and thinking, do you know what, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that. I think people will be arguing now on the show when they listen to it that, well, this was largely the same as what Dyche would select here, which I get. But then the flip side to that is, you look at the squad we've got, there's not much else really to play with. And he did it towards the end there. He put Beto and Calvert-Lewin. There was a two up front there. When have we seen that before? I think obviously it was in desperation then when we got to that stage of the game, still 1-0 behind. What I looked from it, I mean, look, we need to keep it in mind that the context is he's only had one training session with these lads so far. But I did see little bits of difference to what we had under Dyche. You can compare that to Bournemouth or perhaps the last home game under Dyche. There were things that were different. I mean, I've wrote a couple of things down here that seem to be essential of what Sean Dyche had, which seemed to have already gone under Moyes coming in, and that was just simple things like Tarkowski diagonals towards Ndai, who's 5'1" or whatever it is. That didn't seem to be there. That seems to evaporate a bit. There was a sort of a structure from deep, in terms of it wasn't just straightforward. 60, 70-yard passes to try and get Tarkowski to flick it on. Of course, that was there because every team has that in certain times when they have to do it. I didn't see that as Everton's number one, route one thing to do. I saw him he's trying to get it out wide. He's trying to get it into fullbacks. He's more traditional way of playing the game, which, look, it's still not people's cup of tea. People look at it. People looked at it yesterday and they said, well, what's different? And I think you do have to dig a little bit deeper to find what we're talking about here. Like you said there yourself, I agree with what you said in there being not substantial differences and solid differences here. But there were bits and pieces you look at and think that's what he's intended to do. You can see he's trying to look at players in that direction. I think Michalenko's an interesting point to look at with that. Because a lot of people, obviously, he's had one hell of a season, hasn't he? He's been woeful, let's be fair. Yet he looked a lot better than I think he has been. Not difficult, I know, given how poor he has been, but when the overlap was coming on either side of the pitch, I think that stuck out what some of the players are that we've got there, and Harrison being one of them there, which, you know, how many times we said he's not long for being a Premier League footballer, certainly not with ourselves anyway. But he decided to choose him, and I thought that was when I saw the 11. I thought Moyes is going to do this, so he doesn't want to be making those massive changes and putting in like a new 6 or 7 players in there, starting things, completely different system. I don't think he's been there long enough in terms of days to be able to do that. But I do think we've seen different aspects of it. I think midfield-wise as well, I think Gay and Mangala played a little bit more different, a little bit more square to each other. Everton, you know, trying to drop deep, receive the ball, turn, play it out. That felt much more Moyes-like to me. I think the thing that it indicated moreover than that is the quality that we've got, or the lack of quality that we have there. And whilst I've given Idrissa Gueye a lot of praise this season, because I think he's often been one of our best players in the 90 that we've played, Mangala as well, who's looked like a really talented young player in midfield, that was ineffective to me. And I think that in large portions of the game wasn't enough for us to look at getting back into it. And I feared more when they were in and around the ball that Villa were more likely to score against us than we were more likely to score against them. And he did have a couple of big chances, Villa, to kill the game off. You think some of the blasted over from a few yards and stuff like that. That aspect of things. And Dyer was barely in the game as well, which that concerned me a lot, because he has to be, simply put, because he's our more effective player. He's our, most talented player, but on the ball, he's somebody who makes things happen when you least expect it to. The thing I fear about Moyes is, and with that squad he's got, it's going to be really difficult to not make Everton predictable. And I think you could pick any 11 you wanted to. I just feel like we have that much of a flat line of players here, where when do you go on a game, or when do you watch a game and think, wow, this is different, he's playing different? It's either he's playing better or he's playing worse. It's not different, it's better or worse. And it's just that Everton seem to play in a flat line rather than go, north to south, and to put it in a different perspective. And that's where I feel Moyes will struggle mostly to get these lads to click. But yeah, I mean, just to go back to your first point there, I do think there were bits and pieces there that I thought, do you know what, this can work. Fullbacks overlap, and I was really surprised he didn't play Patterson there as well, or even get him on towards the end, given Young's, he's not far away from being slated, is he? Even he put out for the throw, and he's the type of player that gets ripped apart anyway. That it just looked very safe, the way in which he did this. If you'd have said to him beforehand, like if he did 0-0 draw, he'd have bit your hand off. That's the way he operates, is to slow and steady this sort of thing. And I think we're in a position in the season where Everton stay up if they don't lose. And by that, I know it sounds obvious, but by that, I think you draw most games, Everton will stay up. And look, people will be criticising me, saying, well, that's what Sean Dyche was doing. Yes, but there needs to be something different from this team. Needs to be something different from this squad, because something else I've repeated quite a lot this season is an opposition don't need to watch an Everton previous game of the season too long to know what they've got to do against them. And I still think that was the case right up to the 1 minute of Sean Dyche being in charge. Moyes yesterday looked a little bit different. We created chances. Obviously, Calvert-Lewin's the big miss at the end of the game. Really, that goes in. It's probably the fairest result you could get in that match. I think 0-0 or 1-1 would have been that'd be bang on what the result should have been there. The fact that he misses it, I never come away from Goodison thinking that was awful. That was still the same as Dice. People will cry on about that and say it was, but to me, realistically, if you step back, had a look at the perspective you've got, that was Everton looking different. It was Everton looking a little bit more effective, and there was stuff to work on. So take the defeat away. Obviously, it's difficult to, or you can't. Everton were different then, and it'd be really interesting to see what happens against Spurs. Now he lines us up.
Yeah, I think the criminal lack of quality was on show, and I think that we could sit and talk about how they made subtle changes and they did this and they did that. And for me, there was, I mean, like I said, for me, I felt that more bodies were committed forwards than I've seen recently. I felt that more runners were coming from midfield, but like you alluded to there, I think with Gay and Mangala, they're not those type of players who will bust the gut to get into the box and be, or not that they won't, but they're not those type of players. And I think you're taking elements of their game out of it to commit. If you said to one of the or both, I want you in the box for crosses, it doesn't suit their game, and then it leaves us a little bit exposed, and we just haven't got a team who's able to cope with, I suppose, the demands of what's needed at the moment. And because we've been stuck in such a sort of rigid system of play, and I think, like you said, it's been so predictable recently that it's hard to, I suppose, get out of that within one training session, one game. But certainly, I think that a lot of people, and from what I've heard, read, and listened to yourselves on post-match, I certainly felt that there was no question about the effort, and there was no question about the endeavour there. It was just a case of, like we said, the lack of quality that is in that squad. And that leads me nicely onto the next thing I wanted to talk about. And I think for me, after post-match, I was quite encouraged in some of Moyes' quotes. I think it was quite a un-Moyes-like post-match quote, sort of, or un-Moyes-like in the sort of post-match quotes he's given in the past when maybe he was halfway or towards the end of his Everton career. There's a lot more subtle hints towards the players. I feel that they need to be doing more, and I think he can do that now because he knows he's come in to sort of steady the ship and save the day, and it's not gonna fall on his feet if there's issues or what the issues are. Everton, it's not because of David Moyes, and he said this. He said, these players have to be the ones who dig us out of it. And the other thing I was encouraged by Dave is he made a really key quote for me about the players, and I don't have it, the quote word for word to hand, but I know he said something along the lines of, essentially, we need help. We need to get bodies in this January. And going from a team and a manager who in the past have not always been so forward and coming out with these comments about bringing players in, especially in the January transfer window, I thought that was quite key, and I thought that was quite a big statement for both Moyes to make, but also from a club point of view, for him to come out with that. Now, what I want to sort of ask you here is, we hear today that the agenda of the Freakins and the agenda on the football side of things is that recruitment is high on that agenda. Can we trust? I feel we can trust Moyes with signings because I think he's got a great track record, but he's also got a track record of taking a long time to decide. The phrase "dither and Davy" came when he was first with us. He doesn't make signings on the quick. He doesn't make signings on hearsay. He studies his players, and that's had a real positive impact. But in the time we've got left this January, and in the time we've got left this season, 3-4 months left, can we trust Thelwell and can we trust Moyes to that point in the short term we've got to bring the players in this window? And also, can we trust the Freakins? Because this is, we said about their first big test was what Dyche has said to them. This is a big test for them as well, isn't it?
Do you know what? I think that's an excellent point. I think you've got a three-way direction here. I think, and it's not all in. It's either all not in sync, or it's very inexperienced together as a trio. And that's obvious given the owners when he came in 2 months ago. You got Moyes when he came in 4 or 5 days ago, and you've got Thelwell who's been there 18 months, is it?
Similar sort of time to Dyche, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Came in a little bit after, yeah.
Round about that. So, first of all, if we break this down, you've got 3 facets to this in regards to recruitment now. You've got the owners who are obviously at the top of this. They're telling what money's there available, what we can do fund wise in terms of what you're paying in terms of wages, everything like that. That's them who are telling what you've got available there, what you can play with. You've got Thelwell, who has been, I would say, and people can correct me if not, most fans have been critical of him since he's been there. You simply look at some of the players we've brought in. He's not impressed. He's been an issue, many would say, and I'd tend to agree with that as well. Not saying everything's been bad. You look at Ndai, for instance, but the majority of what we've brought in, yes, there's limitations in and around that, but what we've brought in largely with the minimum amount of money we've had just hasn't worked out, or we're still waiting for it to happen, or it's so frustrating that you want to change this up as soon as you can. And then you've got Moyes coming in now, which I think this is really interesting with Moyes coming back in because, again, referring back to 02, very different landscape now in terms of transfers. What Moyes was really good at was going and picking a gem out of the Championship or wherever, odd Premier League times where he could go and get a loan, a free transfer, a really Joleon Lescott type, 5 million maximum KL. We know the story. I don't think that's there these days. I think the gulf between the Championship and the Premier League is a lot wider than it used to be. So I don't think you can make that. I think it's quite lazy to make the assumption that, well, Moyes is going to be able to go into the Championship and pick and choose. I know he did that with Bowen and Hull, and there are still aspects of that. There are those gems out there, but consider what you've just said. We've got about 2 weeks left here to try and get something to get people in. You can make him have a more positive step. I think that's all the more difficult than it's ever been for any manager. So Moyes absolutely deserves the credit for when he did that career-wise. Remains to be seen what he can do. And then you add into that, is it going to be in tandem with Thelwell? I think the owners will have already, given what he said as well, I think it's really interesting what you said there about last night when he came out and said, I've never heard him talk like that before. We basically opened and saying, look, we're going to go and buy players. We need to go. I've got the green light to go and get some players in. What we can spend remains to be seen. But for him to come out and say that, I think that's very strong. It's a very strong statement towards, well, we're going to go and do it, because for fans, that gives you a little bit more, it's more appealing, isn't it, to see that Everton are doing some transfer business, given the issues that we've had financially, but also player-wise. I'll be looking at that thinking, yeah, I might not be getting my game. I might not be starting. I might not be in the 11 if he goes and gets what position we presume needs to be looked at, and somebody else needs to come in for it, i.e., let's say Michalenko, let's say a left back who can come in. If you're him, you've got that thought on your mind. It's very simple, isn't it? In all our lines of work, that if you've got somebody else who does your job as good as you step it up. So I'd like to think that's going to be the process if nobody comes in. Well, you wouldn't expect anyone to come in before Sunday against Spurs. To be interesting to see if any of these players are looking at that and thinking, do you know what? I've got to step up here. It's actually infuriating when that happens, because you think, where was that in the first place?
Yeah.
I think that's the humanistic approach to it. And then I think when you look at the three of those on an individual basis, I'd like it if Moyes was on his own with this. I'd like it that you gave him the opportunity to go and do this on his own, because that's what he proved to be effective when he was at Everton. Thelwell and Moyes, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that, I don't know how long Moyes has been predicted to be the manager. Let's say 3 weeks. No, sorry. Let's say if you get to the end of this window, which is obviously end of January, Moyes will have been at Everton for, let's say, maximum of 3 weeks. So alongside Thelwell, 3 weeks. That doesn't give me much, if any, confidence that they can work together in bringing in the players that we certainly do require. or at least squad players, at the very, very least, have alternatives. When you've brought a manager in that are going to change things around anyway on the pitch, you would hope, although we didn't see it against Villa, I'd want them to be given full charge. And I'd want Moyes knocking at the owner's door saying, I've spoken to Kevin. He's going to take a step back here, or he's going to assist me in the players that I'm trying to sign. He shouldn't be saying, I want to go to him and see who he likes, what he's been looking at since the summer, players that he thinks Everton can go and get. I'd want Moyes taking the lead in that. And, you know, I think that's the only way we change things more positively here, because we may well have what we did with Moyes in terms of time-wise. Times against us anyway, times against David Moyes, given the reputation that he's had, like you referred to there, the dither inside of him. You've got till January to sort this out. And then the owners, David Moyes, and I don't think this hasn't been, to my knowledge, spoken about enough, really. What David Moyes never had at Everton is money in a considerable way. You look at when he left, that's when he just missed out. He crossed paths on Machiri, and as did Martinez afterwards, of course, for the 3 years. But Moyes never got that funding. At West Ham, he had a bit of it, and they've largely done well with it. You think about Bo, and you think about players that he's brought in there, and he went and won the trophy, as this is, heavily spoken about now. So I'm anxious to see what he's like with money. Maybe have to wait till the summer before we see, have real evidence of what he can go and do financially with the club. If we have money to spend, I'm inclined to, if you agree with this, I'm inclined to say, Moyes, you go and do that. Farewell, take a back seat. If he says he likes a player, you go and negotiate it. Something like that. I'd take Farewell away from what he's been doing recently and say, Moyes, there you go.
Yeah, with Thelwell, I'm inclined and I want to give him an opportunity. And then I just remember things like Danjuma on loan. And I remember, and like I'm thinking now about Browier, and Browier a little bit different to Danjuma, because I know he's had a horrific time with injuries, but that just wasn't, it just in hindsight hasn't turned out to be a solid loan. And we're hearing reports today, obviously, they're trying to figure out some sort of way of
Chelsea
getting
wants
that
money
sorted. Chelsea want money, of course they do, yeah. But that'll obviously, carry on, and there'll be discussions behind the scenes regardless of that. I think what I will say is that I think I'm with you in the sense that if Moyes is given a bit more of a lead on this and given a bit more authority to make the signings he wants to make, I would certainly trust him further than I would anybody else at the present moment. And I think as well, if he does get the right player in, we've seen what an impact in the past when we've got a player coming in, hitting the ground running. I mean, I know this wasn't a Moyes signing, but think back to Kevin Campbell when he first joined and he scored them, 9 goals in 6 games, was it? And then, more recently and under Moyes when we got Landon Donovan in, I mean, he made a great impact in the 3 months he was with us, albeit in a better team and in a better situation. But I think Moyes is certainly the man who could get the right player in if he's afforded to. And, it just takes one player, Dave, doesn't it, to give us a real bounce and a real boost and get us flying. And, that leads us nicely onto Sunday, because I think for me, looking at this Spurs side at the minute, they're so up and down. And I think they've had that really poor result against Arsenal, and any derby defeat and any defeat like that's so close to this game, I think is going to have an impact on anyone. Is this a good time to play Spurs?
That's a really good question, because if you're inclined to be a person who has a bet now and again, you put your 50 pence on an accumulated weekend, Spurs must be the worst, most frustrating side that you do, because you look at what they did against Man City away, just destroyed them away from home. Then Ipswich come and beat them at home, I think, or at least got a draw.
They Ipswich beat them, yeah.
Yeah, they're really, really hard to predict. They've got a manager that I'm a fan of now. I know Ryan Reynolds, our good mate there, is just he absolutely adores him and said he'll do a fantastic job at Celtic, which he did, and then he'll come into the Premier League and do the same. I think he's really unpredictable, which makes them dangerous just by that of in a natural way. They've got some outstanding players as well. Spurs are the kind of side that could come to Goodison and absolutely rip us apart within half an hour and the game's over. At the same time, if Everton frustrate them, Everton are to turn them back because they love to play a high line as well. They're going to play a high line against Everton. They'll have more possession than us. So therefore, the question is, can we counter attack? Struggle under Dyche, something I would think Moyes will be looking at right now in the coming days, the next couple of days at training, and sort of drilling these lads into thinking, look at the way you can, look at the way where Spurs are quite vulnerable. They have a sort of soft way in and amongst their midfield at times who are all looking. You think of James Maddison, you think of players who are always constantly trying to get on the ball and drive forward. Going the other way, that's not there so much. So can Everton do that? I don't think he'd go up against them aerially, by the way, because he got some big boys at the back. Big lads there who, Calvert-Lewin, less said the better, really, about that miss. You're going up against a side there that are really good in terms of set pieces. They're able to defend quite well. Lo and behold, that's the one thing that we can trust Everton as being good at set pieces. You need to think of something differently here. You've got to look a little bit outside the box. Would it take a draw? Yes. But I'm really intrigued by this game. If it wasn't a blue, I'd be looking at that thinking could go anyway. That not trying to sit on the fence, but by hopefully the way I've explained it there, this could be a good time to get them because their manager, Tamworth took them to extra time in the FA Cup. They were leading in the North London derby, got beat. I think if he was to lose, I'd go far to saying if Spurs lose against Everton, I could see him losing his job. Postecoglou. Pressure on them as much as it is for us to get points. So it's really, really hard to predict how this is going to go. But I think this is a good time to play them. I think it's a good time to play them. There's all sorts of ways of looking at how poor sides. That's when the most vulnerable side are often at their best. That could well be the case. They're probably sitting there thinking, right, Everton here, we should be a side that goes there and get our confidence from because Everton are way down there. Confidence is on the floor as well. Yes, they've got a new manager, but they've immediately got beat when he came in. That bounce doesn't feel like it's there, like it probably should be when you've got that chance like Calvert-Lewin did at the end against Philly. Come away with a point. If we come away with that point there the other night, and you've got a draw from that, which was thoroughly deserved, we're bouncing then. We're thinking Everton have gone and done the way. It's all about the manner in which way you do so.
It's momentum, isn't it?
Equaliser at last minute. It's like, right, yeah. Moyes is back. This is Everton. Let's go again against Spurs. That is such a fine line, the way things are. These sliding door moments that we tend to have in games. And Spurs are the same. Spurs have got that. If they'd still salvage the draw against Arsenal, they'd be probably going into that buoyed up a little bit. So, yeah, I think it's a good time to play them. Generally, given the issues they've got going and the pressure that they're under, their managers under in particular. So I hope Moyes is playing on that. Hope Moyes is referring that to his players, saying, "Do you know what? These could well be shitting themselves a bit here because it looks to me like they're not a type of club. I don't think that players have dropped tools with a manager. I actually think that they've got a team that really enjoy playing the football he puts out there, but it's quite kamikaze efforts defensively in terms of what they do. Shame thing is for us, we haven't really got really quick players, which would make them a little bit more vulnerable. So, yeah, I'll go back to what I said there. I think we get a draw. I think both sides would settle a draw in this, to be honest.
I think if I was a Spurs fan on Sunday evening, having just watched them struggle to beat National League side Tamworth, knowing that we had, and I say we in inverted commas, if I was a Spurs fan, with my head on in that case,
yeah.
And you had Arsenal on the Wednesday away, and you're probably looking at that thinking, well, we're not good in derbies, we're probably going to get turned over, and then you look at your next game, and it's a Sunday 2:00, and famously not great times to play football if you're struggling, and you're away from home against Everton, who, for want of a better sort of phrase, we are awkward, or we have got this reputation of being awkward to play at Goodison. If I was a Spurs fan, I'd be thinking, just get out of this week. just get whatever we can out of this week and move on, and let's get back to, our stadium and play a home game quickly. Having said that, I remember there was times, ironically, under Moyes where we'd turn over big teams, so-called big teams, and we'd look at a fixture that we had upcoming against a team who were in Everton's predicament at the moment, and we'd get turned over. Yeah. And I'd be so frustrated because I'd be going, that's the games we should be winning. That's the games we should be kicking on. And Spurs, to me, feel a little bit like that. I completely agree with you. I think Spurs are capable of coming to Goodison and winning 3-4-0, because I agree they've got some fantastic players. But I also think as well they have got a soft underbelly, and I think if Everton can do something and work a way around that, Everton could also equally win 2-3-0. It's that kind of game, and it's the way both teams are going at the moment. You feel it could go, like you said, either way. I just hope for our sake that I think we're all hoping for that kind of old-fashioned Moyes performance at Goodison, where it's a graft, it's a struggle, but they give you the moments, they give you something to hang your hat by and really enjoy.
Yeah.
Just quickly, I go back to the Man City game after we got knocked out at the FA Cup brutally by Wigan, when we all thought we were on our way to Wembley, and we just got completely turned over by them. And there was that famous Yelovich goal at the street end, and the ground went off that day, Dave. And I think we're all craving that Moyes feel again, aren't we? We love the nostalgia around his appointments. We love the feel of having what he gave us and the prospect of having that back. But it feels like now we kind of need to see that. And I know it's early days, and I know he's only just walked through the door and he's got a lot of work to do. And we've discussed the task and the job he's got at hand. But if we come away from that game Sunday, Dave, and it is another defeat, I don't think anyone will be pointing the fingers necessarily at the manager, because I think we'll all say, he's only been here a week. We've got to give him an opportunity to sign players, etc., whatever it might be. But the mood's going to be quite glum, isn't it? What will the feeling... The point I'm trying to make is we've come away from this defeat and it's kind of, we know where the squad's at.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a fear that if we lose the game on Sunday, questions will be starting to be asked of, well, we don't want to get rid of the manager, but is he actually the right man? Is he actually the man who, has he got that magic wand who can get results? Is he going to be the Moyes we know? And I think these questions will naturally be asked. And I'm not for one second suggesting that we're going to be, on this show or any other Evertonians going to be saying he should be gone or he should be sacked or he's not the right man, we should never appoint him. I don't think that's going to be the case. But I just think a defeat on Sunday, and I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked about how does this Everton team get results? We've already discussed at length about we're not scoring goals and how do we get goals. And we've said at the start of the show, we can see sort of slight improvements here and there and ways he's going to go about it. But whilst I don't think a defeat on Sunday condemns us to relegation, I think you start going from the mode I'm in now, where I think we'll be okay, to actually I'm very worried now. Do you feel similar, and do you think fans will feel similar if that's the case on Sunday?
I'm petrified. I have to be honest. I am scared that Everton go this season, because this would be the fourth year on the spin. This is it is now, isn't it? The fourth year in a row that we're in a relegation scrap, and it's easy to sleepwalk in these circumstances, thinking that, well, there's three that are worse than us. This is the toughest we'll have had it if you have been watching Ipswich, because they've got a really talented young manager who's going to be on to bigger and better things as he goes forward. I, in a very lazy way, said that I think that this season's Luton, which everyone likes to watch them, but ultimately they're going to be going down. I'm not too sure about them. Leicester, I think, well, obviously, think Southampton are gone. Leicester, I'm not sure. But if there's just that one spot, if there's that 18th place that ends up being, we're really in amongst that. We really are. And I think that the one thing when Moyes came in, I thought, you know what? I couldn't have thought of a better manager to be coming up against these two sides and having back-to-back games at Goodison here. This is what Moyes built his trade onto, is being able to get results against these sides at Goodison. We've done it so many times. You mentioned there about Spurs at home, where you just get that little thing, that little little edge, that little diamond you'll see during a game where you're like, right, this is it now, and everyone's on the toes, and Everton go on and get a late goal or go and win it. A Tim Cahill moment, a talisman type of performance. I hope he develops one of our players into be able to be that sort of player. From what we've had so far and seen so far, that couldn't be further from the truth at the moment. We've got Ipswich to come to Goodison too, and I'm looking forward to in advance here. But Brighton away is the one to come after that. Then you've got the double header, and you've got obviously Bournemouth FA Cup again. FA Cup goes to one side for me. I don't even think it's a decent thing to look at and think, oh, do you know what? It's good to take a step out of the Premier League and all of us to have a look at something different here rather than concentrating on a relegation fight. But Brighton, Leicester, Liverpool, again, 2 of those 3 at home. The last 2 of those 3 at home. You start looking at the situation, thinking this is the Everton have hit a really difficult time where you see that they're essentially going to be a Premier League side here. They're going to be in a battle right down to the last day. Never mind when we beat Bournemouth 1-0 and, you know, we had the last game that everyone could just relax and look to the summer. And then we all look at each other and say the exact same thing every summer. What's that? You probably get it tattooed. Never again. Never again. Never again. It's. I think it might be quite ironic that this is the time I look at it and think it won't be again if we're still in the league, because I think we've got some genuine financial clout, and then we've got the stadium. I think there's a feel-good momentum amongst Everton. It's getting over that final hurdle. It's going to be the most difficult here, and I think it's going to be the most difficult of what we've had to do. Probably with aside what we did against Palace that night. If it comes to that point, I don't think all of us will be able to cope with that if Everton get into a position that way. Do you include Moyes in the blame towards this? No manager's going to get a free hit at Everton, because ultimately he's against it straight away, because I don't think any other manager we got in apart from him, there'd be more of a majority of Everton fans that are thinking, well, let's wait and see. For many, Moyes needs to hit the ground running. That obviously wasn't it against Villa. You don't do it against Spurs. I guarantee you, mate, you'll still get people saying, this is wrong. I told you so. You need to change again. I think Leeds did it when they had 3 different managers. Allardyce came at the end and they weren't able to stay up a couple of years ago. I'd hate to think Everton are in that situation. We've got owners who've been doing that in the past, lest we forget as well. Over at Roma, just seem to change manager when they think they need to. With what we have left, the opponents we have as well, it's hard. It's hard to see Moyes still being the Everton. I can't believe I'm saying this. It's hard to see Moyes still being Everton's manager at the end of the season if we're in the bottom 3, say, with half a dozen games left to go, because people won't have it.
And just to interrupt there, Dave, and I apologise for doing that, but we're not sitting here questioning the manager and wanting to get rid of him if we start getting a couple of bad results. We're not saying that.
No,
I think
we aren't. No, I know we're not, but in general,
we're saying that there will be questions around it. I think, and you know, listen, if we've gone for a Graham Potter type manager, there would have been people, if we'd have got beat last night, saying we should have gone for Moyes because he would have been a safer pair of hands.
Yeah.
We've gone for Moyes, and if we continue being on this poor form, it will be you should have gone for someone more progressive who would have, you know, tried something to get you scored and go. So it's no win. I think that we're just sort of saying about the fact that there's a fear there. I mean, you know, I don't want to finish the show being too negative, because I think that I still do believe, I really do, Dave, that I know we haven't seen it greatly, but I still believe there's players good enough there to get us out of the mess we're in. I think if we're hearing, you know, about players potentially coming in, and like we said, it only takes one play, it only takes one result. You know, we win on Sunday, I think the ground again will be bouncing. I think people will be looking forward to the Brighton game and maybe nicking a point down there or sneaking a win like we did a couple of years ago when we got that out of nowhere 5-1 results, and then you start looking up, you know. And I think that's probably what we need to do, because I think we are capable of doing that, and I think that's what could happen. So I'll give you the final word then on a result. I know you said you'd take a draw, but with your head on now, how do you see it going on Sunday?
I think if you get your foot down as soon as you start against these, I think you can get them to fold. If you get a goal in the first half hour, which will prove extremely difficult to us to score a goal
I
at
agree.
all at any point in the game at the moment, but if Everton are able to go and do that early goal against them, obviously, needless to say, but Goodison's on its toes. Everybody's bounced around. You've got a proper atmosphere coming in that we have. Neglect is the wrong way. We have not been able to do under Sean Dyche and for quite some time in general anyway, even towards the end of Lampard's tenure. If Everton are able to do that, Everton will go on and win that game and they'll keep a clean sheet. Spurs go in front. I don't see us taking anything from that game because Everton are susceptible if they start having to go the other way. And I think if you look at the players, Son hasn't been on form for Spurs. He scored the other night, isn't he? He's not been on the form that he is. He's captain there now as well, isn't he? Kulusevski's one of my favourite players in the Premier League. Him up against Mikalenko is quite a scary thought for me. You've got to score first against these. Score first against these, Everton go on and win it. I just don't want to think about anything that doesn't happen. Anything else that happens apart from Everton going 1-0 up in that. Like I say, I'd take a draw. I think David Moyes would take a draw.
Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that sooner or later something will click because I just think it has to. That's my feeling on it. And I think we have to think that way because if we don't, there's only one way we're going. And I think Sunday for me represents a really, really good chance of doing that. So fingers crossed that we can get it over the line and get that massive 3 points. I think it'd just give everyone a massive lift. I think it'd just be something for Moyes as well to go, do you know what? I've got my first win on my return. Now's the time to kick on. So we'll leave it there anyway. My thanks to Dave once again for allowing me to host the show this evening in a bit of a role reversal. We've got plenty more coming up, as always, on the Blue Room. We've got your mailbag tomorrow back with Les. The lads will be back with you over the weekends on Sunday with another post-match. And I'm pleased to say as well, Rob Vera will be joining them again. He's currently over at the moment and he's going to be coming to the game again on Sunday. Rob always sees one win as well, by the way. I was here when we played Palace a few years back when Tosin scored that last-minute goal. And Rob Vera was over for that one. So he does always see a win when he's coming over. So that's another thing. I'm sure we'll get a win for him this Sunday. And then don't forget next Monday as well, Dave will be back with Les and Roger for Blue Monday, which again is essential listening on a Monday after the weekend's games. And then the brilliant byline will be back next Tuesday with our very own Matt Jones and Paddy Boylan, who give some fantastic insights. If you haven't listened to it, give it a listen. I think the two of them with the journalistic backgrounds and what the stories they can tell and some of the insight they give, it's a wonderful listen, and I strongly encourage people to give it a go. So that's it for this week's Weekly. Up the toffees, and we'll speak to you again soon.